3, 2. Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. We were not kidding when we said that we would be coming back with shows throughout the entire week. It is Thursday morning, and we are gearing up for Sunday's matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and Miami Dolphins. But today, we're going to let week 3 take the backseat. Joshua Houtz, there are some conversations going on Twitter, and before I even get into those, what's going on, man? How are you today?
Feels like it's been forever since I saw you, right? It's literally been less than 24 hours, and we're back here pushing through it. So it's a pretty good day, man. As good of a day as a Wednesday can be. And I'm excited to be able to talk about what we're going to do today. How have you been, man?
I'm good. It's been frustrating. Still, we're navigating some harsh waters. Tua Tagovailoa is officially on injured reserve. We dove into our thoughts about the quarterback room, Tua, and much more on yesterday's show. Thank you, everybody who already listened to that, and people who didn't. My apologies for a mini rant. But Josh, the Dolphins signed Tyler Snoop Huntley. It looks like Skylar Thompson is going to be the starting quarterback. Tim Boyle's floating around, and I don't want to say anything more than Tim Boyle's floating around. I think that's exactly where he should be. But let me ask you this, Joshua Houtz. If you were Chris Grier and you see how situations are folding around the league, we have Brian Dable not using a kicker. We have the Eagles and Vic Fangio collapsing in the fourth quarter of football games. And we have the Carolina Panthers benching former number 1 overall pick Bryce Young. They're pushing forward with Andy Dalton to hopefully win some games, get back on track. So let me ask you this. Would you trade for Bryce Young?
What's a draft capital? You got me all twisted on my words. I'm over here. I'm tongue-tied. I mean, I am sitting here and I try to look back at when the Dolphins, I was a big proponent for the Dolphins trade for Josh Rosen, just throwing any sort of dart at the quarterback position because it was it's 25 years now since Marino retired, and Tua gave us some tease of what it can be, but we're still as of now, right? We're looking for a quarterback. So if the Carolina Panthers were going to get rid of Bryce Young, which it sounds like, they're probably still teetering. I joke that he's gone based on the quote they put out today. But if he's truly, even in the discussion of being traded, I mean, I think the Dolphins should absolutely call him. I pulled up a Mike McDaniel quote that we'll get to in a bit, but he thinks highly of Bryce Young. And it's more about just being able to, try and see if you can get the most out of a player, which we see what he did with Tua Tagovailoa. So it depends on the draft capital, but I would not be against it because for moving forward, after what we saw with Tua Tagovailoa, I'm good at throwing a dart every single year. If you want to make a trade for Justin Fields, a Zach Wilson, whatever it is, I don't care anymore. Just get as many quarterbacks in there so that we don't have to continue to go through this endless cycle. So that was my loaded answer, Jake. What about you, man? Would you trade for Bryce Young?
I think I would. I think there is a little bit of a concern that I do not want to trade a 2019 second round pick and a 2020 fifth round pick. That's what the Dolphins gave up for Josh Rosen. And Josh, at the time, I absolutely loved the dart, but when you see somebody play 3 games and then that's it, we could probably, even if we wanted to, blame Brian Flores in that situation for how quickly the Josh Rosen experience dissolved. The Dolphins can't afford to give that up. I don't think that Bryce Young has shown enough to garner a second round pick, let alone 2 picks. So I think the draft compensation is going to be an interesting conversation. A few other quarterbacks in recent years who were basically given up on their first team and traded away. We had Sam Darnold drafted in 2018. He was traded to the Carolina Panthers in 2021. So already, Josh, right away, we're talking about a quarterback who had a lot more time than someone like Bryce Young, who the Panthers are saying they're not giving up on him, but when you're jumping ship 18 games in, it's not giving up, but it is as close as you can get to that. So we have Denver acquired former second overall pick, Zach Wilson, and a 2024 seventh rounder from the Jets in exchange for a 6th rounder. Again, Zach Wilson played a lot longer. Well, not a lot longer, but more starts than someone like Bryce Young, given more of an opportunity. And then the Cowboys traded, this might be the best comparison I've seen. The Cowboys traded a 2024 4th round pick for Trey Lance. That was just after 8 starts. Yes, there were some injury concerns. And I think the 49ers were a little better off with Brock Purdy compared to what the Panthers are doing with Andy Dalton. But just kind of looking at those past trades, no way I'm doing it for a second. But I don't know if the Panthers are doing it. Josh, I think I'd do it for a 4th, that Trey Lance steal. What would you do?
Yeah, I'm so thankful. I saw the blue quote, but I didn't actually read it. I'm so thankful you pulled that up because that's almost the exact draft capital, right? That 2024 fourth round pick. So for me, I would even go one step further. We can make it a conditional third if he starts X amount of
Ooh.
games or whatever it may be. So yeah, if it's there, man, I would definitely throw a dart at Bryce Young, and that's coming from me. When you asked would I do it, I mean, I'm not the biggest Bryce Young fan, but again, you don't have to be. The guy's
Yeah.
23 years old. Yes, we know he's a little bit of a he's
Munchkin.
yeah, I was gonna say yeah, mini Tua is what was I calling him? Tua light or something like that. He kind of reminds you of Kyler Murray. I keep getting mixed up. I almost would say Skylar Thompson, Kyler Murray. I almost said Skylar Thompson. That maybe that means something, but yeah, man, keep throwing darts if you have to. Again, we don't know Tua Tagovailoa's long term health, and again, maybe the Dolphins wait a little bit. Maybe they call up the Panthers. They start talking about things. We see what happens with Andy Dalton there, and then we see if they eventually move on from the trade deadline's a little bit away. So it's definitely possible. And, it raises a question. What other quarterback could come up in trade talks? I mean,
Great
and
point.
that's just some of the questions that we have to deal with. But as of now, it sounds like the Dolphins are absolutely riding with Skyler and Snoop. But I would have no problem setting a 2024 or 2025, I guess, at this point. Fourth round pick, man. Sign me up.
Before we get too deep into this, Bryce Young, Josh, you were absolutely awesome being a detective here. We're fans first, and I think that's fairly obvious. I have a degree in journalism, and Josh, you work your tail off to find produce clips, to find old clips. You are in the trenches all the time when we got this stuff. So you did a great job here. You found a Mike McDaniel quote talking about Bryce Young when the Dolphins played the Carolina Panthers last year. So I'm going to play this, let everyone hear Mike McDaniel's thoughts, and then we'll continue on.
You watch Bryce in the pre-draft process, but what have you seen from him so far in his young career?
Baller with a bright future. He's one of the few young quarterbacks that you see coming out that see defenders when operating as a quarterback. His vision is uncanny, and his timing and rhythm to the game. You can see that he's going to be a very good player in this league, in my opinion. There's nothing more difficult than being a rookie starting quarterback. In that process, you learn live speed. What I've seen is a guy that's showing his talent through the rhythm of plays and learning certain things with regard to, he's uncanny in the pocket, how he moves, and he'll continue to get better at it, extending plays, and throws a very catchable ball that's built for yak. You can tell there's a reason why the guys that he's played with in college, and that how much respect they have for him. If you don't believe me, just ask any Bama player, and then you can tell why he's earned the respect of not only other rookies but veterans on that team.
Baller with a big brain. Josh, that's definitely one way to start the Bryce Young discussion, right? 23 years old, 5'10", 204 pounds. He was 0-2 this season, completing just 55.4% of passes, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Throughout his 18 games, has a touchdown to interception ratio of 11-13, 3,122 yards. Josh, and this isn't even a situation where we can blame a coach, blame a different scenario, because Dave Canales is now the head coach of the Panthers. He's been there for a whopping 2 games. He was the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year. He was actually given a lot of credit for jump-starting Baker Mayfield with the Bucs, but as we're seeing through 2 games, those Bucs games are legit. Last year, the Panthers started 0-6 under Frank Wright. So, Josh, Bryce Young hasn't been given the healthiest scenario with the Carolina Panthers. There's been all the horror stories about David Tepper, the owner, too, whether it's walking into a restaurant, taking the hat off some dude, really weird scenarios. But have you seen enough to give up on someone like Bryce Young after 18 games?
And all those stories are pretty crazy with the owners going batshit. Like he's already realized that CJ Stroud's an absolute monster. And yeah, so I don't know if I've seen enough to give up on him. But I mean, when when we see every year, these teams that are just throwing away, some of the guys you mentioned, a Trey Lance, a Zach Wilson, some of those guys that the previous regime didn't drafted, and now this new regime, doesn't want to get stuck with, they do end up moving on. So based on everything I'm hearing out of there, it sounds like it's going to eventually lead to a divorce between the two sides. But me personally, I can't sit here and invest the first overall pick on a guy and then, have this ever evolving door around him, similar to the Tua stuff, right? It sounds like whether it's just Frank Wright's scheme's not right, Dave Cannell's, whatever it is, they aren't doing right by Bryce Young. So I don't know what I do, but at this point, I think they're ready just to nip it in the butt, send him somewhere else. And I mean, Dan Orlovsky, I think that was the other ESPN analyst spot. And I mean, I don't know if it's because of the offense we run, which timing based and things like that absolutely work to Bryce Young's strengths, or it's just the fact that they already saw Mike McDaniel kind of rebuild Tua Tagovailoa. But whatever it is, that seems to be where everybody's throwing the Bryce Young trade. And for now, I'm sitting here, I'm fine stewing on it, and let's see if anything comes of it.
2021 Heisman Trophy winner, a 2020 national champion, those Nick Saban teams. Josh, if you were a Panthers fan, would you be able to stomach just getting a 4th-round pick less than 2 years later? Because I do think this would be something the Dolphins should pursue, especially if we're talking draft capital we like. But God, man, I actually work with a Panthers fan, and I said, what's the lowest you'd take for him? I said, would you take a 4th? And he said, absolutely not. So, I mean, yes, as Dolphin fans, this is something we'd be interested in, but you need 2 to tango. Would you be willing to push it up any more, or would you stand firm on that? Because I don't think I'd offer any more than a 4th for someone like Bryce Young. I understand the Panthers wanting to hold on, considering what you invested in them, but I think that might be the biggest issue here. It's fun to play Madden and in the fantasy world, but God, it's so hard to imagine the Panthers saying this early in the game, all right, we'll take a 4th, especially in the middle of the year when we have a roster that's really floating down the river on fire.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd go any further, and maybe it's just me having, at one time I balled into the Josh Rosen, the fake spike. Oh, he kind of reminds you of Dan Marino because he had the fake spike game. Everyone's saying he's the most pro-ready quarterback. I had egg on my face with that, and the Dolphins gave up a 2nd-round pick there. So, the times are changing. I think the draft capital is slowly going down, but for me, I think I'd stay right there at that 3rd-round compensatory, and I'm starting to think about it. Didn't the Dolphins give up a 3rd-round pick to move up to get Jalen Wright with the Eagles? So I don't even know if they have that 3rd-round compensatory pick, but they are getting some this offseason. I'm spinning out of control, man. I guess I do maybe a compensatory 2nd, but then I'm going back to the Josh Rosen thing. And again, it all goes back to how serious to his injury is. Is he coming back? Is he not? If he's not, then you got to start looking at, can you maybe have a Bryce Young and build him up to be, I'm not even saying franchise quarterback. Sicko stuff now, man.
And that's the thing, too. You are pocketing this contract over the coming years. And I had a little bit of egg on my face, Josh. I thought for a number 1 overall pick, this contract would be a little bit more expensive. But looking ahead to next year's cap hit, quote unquote, just $10 million, and the year following that is $12 million. I remember seeing Matt Moore being riled up about him making like $5 million, but considering that 10 mil is going to be about 3.7% of the cap, I think it's something the Dolphins could manage. But do you feel like it's something they should manage when you got the Tyreek Hill contract, the Jalen Waddle contract, and I mean, I don't want to name the whole roster.
Yeah, and then we got all the guys we want to pay, right? Javon Holland, Jalen Phillips. We know we're going to be in the capocalypse or whatever Omar Kelly likes to call it. So I don't know. This seems like as we get further in this pod, it seems like this is just a mad in a pipe dream. But again, people are talking about it. So there has to be at least something there. And we heard the Panthers, at least today, say we're not really looking to move him. I mean, I don't know what that means. It sounds like you're just saying all the right things. So I don't know, man. If the Dolphins don't do it, though, what's to say another team won't throw a dart there, right? I mean, again, 1st overall pick, there has to be more than just the Carolina Panthers that thought this highly of him, right?
You want to go full Pepe Sylvia? Let's wrap up here. Josh, actually,
Always.
Before my final Pepe Sylvia here, I just want to shout out, tomorrow we will be back with the Behind Enemy Lines, going in deeper about the Seattle Seahawks. But this was just a little interesting topic, and this is a conversation we do have to have as Miami Dolphin fans. Chase Daniel, who's been working at, I think it's been Fox recently, Fox Sports, he got real wild with it, Josh. So I want to share this trade with you. He proposed a 3-team trade where the Rams get Bryce Young, the Dolphins get Matthew Stafford, and the Panthers get Dolphins' 2nd and Rams' 3rd-round pick. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of this trade, Josh, Matthew Stafford on the Dolphins? Sure, okay, let's get crazy.
Yeah, I'm for it. I mean, at this point, I'm for anything. I mean, now it's just a sicko in me. I'm just sitting back. I'm like, some people just want to watch a world burn, and if we're gonna go down the shitter or whatever's gonna happen, I want to at least have fun
Right.
doing it. So that's crazy, man. If we could somehow land this, I just laugh because it seems like he's just completely spitballing, right? Chase Daniels just getting this crazy idea, but yeah, we've seen crazier things happen, right?
So something to consider, Josh, is that statistically, the entire Rams roster is injured. The entire roster, top to bottom. You don't have to check that completely, but they're at a point where Puka Nacua is on injured reserve. Cooper Kupp has a high ankle sprain, and they can't even put him on injured reserve just for the fact that they won't have enough injured spots to make him come back, for him to be available to be reactivated. So that's kind of where Chase Daniel was getting the idea that the Miami Dolphins are really, or excuse me, the Rams are really stuck here. And Josh, over the next 2 years of Matthew Stafford's contract, he has a total of $4 million in guaranteed salaries. So it's not the craziest thing. Yes, he has a cap number of almost 50 million, but when you have that guaranteed, the Dolphins have Brandon Shore and Chris Greer, excuse me. I think they could do a little bit of a manipulation there to make it work. If the Dolphins could figure out a way to do this, sign me up. For all the ghosts that are screaming into their radio, there is no way that the Rams are accepting this trade, where they have to trade Stafford and a 3rd-round pick to get Bryce Young. God, that sounds awful. Josh, what would you be willing to give up in this scenario? Because I kind of think that the Dolphins would have to give up their own 2nd and their own 3rd to kind of stir the pot here, maybe a little bit more, and I think I'd be willing to do that.
Sorry.
You're good,
Kid
man.
just ran up and asked me for a cookie. All right. For me, honestly, Jake, I'm sitting here and I'm wondering if I wouldn't rather just hopefully get Bryce Young for that 4th compensatory 4th, because I mean, you're getting rid of a 2nd for Matt Stafford. I mean, but that almost guarantees you should be pushing for a playoff spot. I don't know, man. I think I'd be, again, just willing to sit here and just let the Dolphins, Chris Greer, do whatever you want to do. Mike McDaniel, do whatever you want to do. And I'm just going to sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. But Matt Stafford in this offense, we saw him win the Super Bowl with the Rams. I mean, I saw someone say people forget he won a Super Bowl more than Burrow lost a Super Bowl or something like that. It's just sickening, the disrespect for Matt Stafford.
Yeah, man, and that's kind of why I think this is interesting. Miami needs their Matt Stafford. Well, why not go out and get the actual Matt Stafford? And these are fun to talk about, man, but at the same time, before I wrap up here, it's so sad. It's so freaking depressing that this is where we're at. I think the Dolphins are going to continue to kind of sniff around and look for the right scenario. I think Matthew Stafford might be a little too crazy, but I also like what you said, the Justin Fields, someone like Zach Wilson. I think as we continue navigating throughout this year, I think above all else, Josh, we just want the Dolphins to keep trying. I think this is a playoff-ready roster if you have somebody that can get them the football, but that's a tall task.
Yeah, and I know it's fun to come on here and talk about Bryce Young and things like that, but it sounds like they're very they believe in Skylar Thompson. It doesn't sound like it's just, words, although it probably is just words, but we saw how much it means to him to get the start. And then Tyler Huntley, I mean, again, at this point in the season, early on, the Dolphins, I feel like that was one of the best moves they could have made. So I think at least they're going to wait and see what those guys can do. But again, if someone's dangling Bryce Young, they really, really want to trade him. Chris Greer be the first one. I remember Jonathan Taylor, right? We almost traded for him. Like there's no deal that there's no player that Chris Greer won't at least call and ask about. So do your due diligence, whatever it may be. But as of now, we're riding with Skylar. We'll see what Huntley can do, and we can just hope and pray that Tua comes back. But one thing's for sure, man, we got to start throwing darts at the quarterback position or whatever it may be, because we cannot find ourselves sitting here with another injury derailing the entire season.
You have said it all, my friend. That is it. That is all the time we have today on Another Dolphins podcast. If you're just stepping onto this ride with us, we try to do 2 of our bigger shows throughout the week. Those are about 40 minutes, and we provide a little clip with those. We try to aim for one of those, maybe like a Tuesday and then a Friday evening. And this Friday evening, you'll see us break down some key matchups with the Cats. So if you're new to the show, please hit that subscribe button. You can find us Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. You want to see our beautiful faces, 560 WQAM. That is it. Thank you all for listening. We will be back tomorrow, but until then, fins up.
Fins up.
Fins up.